सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। ॐ परं वरिष्ठं ब्रह्मिष्ठं परमानन्दरूपिणं परमार्थानन्दयतिं सद्गुरुं प्रणतोऽस्म्यहम्। Hope all of you have caught up with the recap recorded video, which was put up last week, so that we all are reminded of our journey so far in Vivekachudamani. So the Acharya has answered all of the 7 questions raised by the student. By verse 60, he had completed that. So the 7 questions were presented in verse 25. Which is what is put up here. Ko nama bandhaha, katamesha agataha, katam pratisthasya, katam vimokshaha, ko savanatma, paramakka atma, tayor viveka katameta duchyatam. So the first question, ko nama bandhaha, meant what is bondage? The answer being, deha atma bhavana. Mistaking the body as myself is bondage, right? In simple English, simple self-misconception is bondage. Katam esha agataha. How did this bondage come about? Atma ajnanat. Self-ignorance is the cause of bondage, because self-ignorance leads to self-misconception, right? So the cause of the bondage is self-ignorance. Then katam asya pratishta. How does this bondage persist in a living being? We saw the answer indirectly by comparing samsara to a tree, by generating endless desires leading to endless actions, so leading to endless cycles of birth and death. The bondage persists or continues. Katam vimokshaha. How can one get freedom from bondage? That was answered by following karma yoga and jnana yoga as prescribed by the Vedic scriptures or the smritis, the other texts which follow the Veda, like the Bhagavad Gita, etc. So by following karma yoga and jnana yoga as presented by the Vedic scriptures, one can get freedom. So bhakti is not separately mentioned because, as I said, it is considered part of karma yoga only, or jnana yoga. Basically, it's the atmosphere in which the karma yoga and jnana yoga is followed. Then kaha asau anatma, the 5th question. What do you mean by the non-self? The answer is everything other than me, the experiencer or observer, is the non-self or anatma, which means the entire world is anatma. There is no dispute about this. Very important. Nobody disputes the world because everybody agrees that everything other than me is anatma. You will immediately say, okay, the world is anatma. However, the body, mind, sense complex is also anatma because it is also experienced entity, only different from the experiencer, me. Therefore, body, mind, sense complex is also anatma, right? That is the most important teaching that we get from the scriptures. Paramaha atma kaha. So if the body, mind, sense complex also is other than me, then what is me, right? Even if, say, the prana, the mind, the thoughts, even the buddhi, the intellect, if I treat all of them as different from me because I experience them, then what is this blessed self, right? So the experiencer, the witness consciousness principle, the eternal, all-pervading consciousness principle is the Atma. It has got 5 aspects or 5 features, right? And then tayor vivekaha katam. How can a spiritual seeker differentiate Atma from Anatma? So it can only be done intellectually with the help of scriptures and reasonings. So it can be intellectually separated, right? Without the scriptures, we can never do this discerning, right? So the 3 bodies, I am not, Stula, Sukshma, Karana, Shariram. I am not the Panchakoshas, using the Panchakosha Viveka method. right? We use that to distinguish the Atma and Anatma. So, Panchakosha Viveka is the answer to the seventh and final question. Thus, all the 7 questions are answered, and that is completed in verse 60. Now, subsequent to verse 60, if all the 7 questions were answered, what is the topic, right? I explained this also. So, we actually say that the later verses are extensions to the final 7th question only, the answer, right? So, this extension is the most important teaching of the Vedanta called the Mahavakya Vichara. So, from 61 onwards, we are in this extended part, answer to the 7th question. And the extension teaching has got 3 stages. The first stage is arriving at the real meaning of the word I, understanding the revised I, because after Panchakosha Viveka, we should know that there are 2 I's. One is the common I, which everybody understands, which includes the body, mind, sense complex. And after Panchakosha Viveka, the revised I does not include the body, mind, sense complex, right? So, before and after Panchakosha Viveka, the body, mind, etc. are excluded, right? So, even thoughts are excluded. Pure consciousness is the real I, and this real I, which is the consciousness, which excludes the Shariratrayam and Panchakosha, is technically known as Shodhita Aham Padarthaha. Okay, purified I, free from any form of adulteration. We have removed the adulterated entity. Otherwise, we have basically removed the superimposed body, mind complex, etc. Right? So, when you arrive at the purified I, it is called the Aham Pada Lakshyartha. Therefore, the first level of extended teaching is understanding the real I, the revised I as pure consciousness. And this pure consciousness is the real nature of not only me, but of every living being, every human being, every jiva. That essential nature, the real nature, is pure consciousness. And in verse 63 and 64, Acharya said, the non-experienceable consciousness is the experiencer within double quotes of everything experienceable. Technically, we don't even like to use the word experiencer. Okay. It is sanditya matrena, just by its mere presence. That's all. Right. So we should never attempt, however, to experience the Atma. Working for Atma experience is the biggest blunder. Right. So what is the aim of Shastra? Shastra never helps me experience, right? The Atma. Shastra helps me to claim I am the Atma, who's ever the experiencer, never the experienced. So the famous Kenopanishad mantra says, Anyadeva tad viditat ato aviditadadi. Iti shushruma purvesham enastat vyachachakshire. So we have heard the following teaching of the ancient teachers who revealed that Brahman to us. It is indeed different from the known and is different from the unknown. Like up to this we have seen. So this is extension number 1, which is basically verses 61 to 65, pointing out that essential nature of every individual is the consciousness principle. I would just like to take a few seconds to, make an important observation. Now, if you don't understand this aspect, it's fine. If you understand, I'll be very happy. Initially, as a Vedantic student embarking on this journey, you are like kind of very, very obsessed with meditation, right? Because you want to concentrate and you want to make sure that, you focus on something because you are looking to experience something in meditation. What happens as you go through this journey of Vedantic, scriptures, Advaita Vedantic learning, you realize that Atma is not something to be experienced. Then what exactly is Vedantic meditation, right? When you start thinking deeply, because nobody really clarifies, because I guess the gurus want us to go through the journey and actually discern. So what exactly is Vedantic meditation is, if you just dwell upon the thoughts or the teachings of Vedanta, that is the essential nature of I, I, the Atma, right? What am I, right? And then discern yourself from all the other anatma and stay in the teaching for a length of time in the mind, right? You're not removing thoughts, you're not silencing the mind, which is what the other shastras teach you, right? Nirvikalpaka samadhi, yoga, etc. But here you are actually dwelling in those thoughts, the Vedantic thoughts of your real nature. That's all. So now, if you relate to Vedantic meditation, it can be in the form of your own self recollecting all the teachings early in the morning, because you know that time you don't have other thoughts entering your mind. Or it could even be Shravana Bhyasa Rupa Nididhyasanam, as mentioned by Vidyaram Swami in Panchadashi, where you just recollect your Shravanam. For instance, your Vivekachudamani class you've attended. Today we are discussing all this. Just staying absorbed in those thoughts, right? That is also fine. Or listening to the class, the voice of the teacher, the guru, and staying or dwelling in that, that is also a form of Nididhyasana. That is Vedantic meditation. There is nothing mystic about it, and there is no need to look for some new strange experience that's going to come, right? So I just thought I should use this opportunity to clarify this, because it's been in several students' minds for a long time. I don't know whether they even get this clarified, though acharyas have talked about it in texts like Panchadashi, Vicharasagara, etc. Okay. So the extension number 1, coming back, we were talking about from 61 to 65, essential nature of every individual was talked about. Now the extension number 2, 60, 65 we have to still do. 62, from this verse, from 66 to 73, which is the extension number 2, 8 verses are very profound verses. Here Upanishad talks about the essential nature of the universe, Jagat. So first we talk about the essential nature of the individual living being, the micro level. Then we talk about the universal self, the changeless essential nature of the entire cosmos, which includes all the living beings other than me and all the non-living things, including the galaxies, time, space, cosmos, right? So the essential nature of the cosmos, the macro, right, is Brahman. So 61 to 65 is the essence of every individual, Atma. 66 to 73, Brahman, which is the universal self, the essence of the entire cosmos, right? So 2 levels. And then the 3rd level, we talk about Atma, Brahma, Aikyam. And in the Upanishad, there are several statements which give the Aikyam. The statements are called Mahavakyam, and several Mahavakyams are there. Okay. So this is the broader canvas. And in the following shloka, this is 65, Atma is given a brilliant description, right? As I said, these verses correspond to some of the verses we have seen before, right? So if you see, this one corresponds to Prakriti Vikriti Bhinna Shuddha Bodha Swabhavaha Sadasadidamashesham Bhasayan Nirvisheshaha Vilasati Paramatma Jagradadishvavastha Swahamaha Miti Sakshat Sakshi Rupena Buddhehe. Right? So this is the parallel shloka now in verse 65. We will enter that. Swarna Bhagini, you can repeat after me. Jagrat Swapna Sutyuptishu Sputataram.
Jagrat Swapna Sushuptishu Sputataram.
Yosau Samunbrinjate.
Yosau Samunjrumbhate.
Pratyagrupataya sadahamahamityantasfuranekadha.
Pratyagrupataya sadahamahamityantasphurannekadha.
Nanakara vikara bhagina iman.
Nanakara vikara bhagina iman.
Pashyannaham dhimukan.
Pashyannaham dhimukhan.
Nityananda chidatmana spurati.
नित्यानन्दचिदात्मना स्फुरति
तं विद्धि स्वमेतं हृदि.
तं विद्धि स्वमेतं हृदि.
So it's a description of Atma here, the consciousness principle, which is the real meaning of the word I, right? So this is the exact description. We will see the meaning. Sada aham aham iti, right? So there is basically yaha asau samujrumbate, right? You see that? Yaha asau samujrumbate. Yaha asau means the Atma, the real I, the Atma, samujrumbate, shines out, stands out, which is available all the time, unmissably or unmistakably. That which can never be missed by anyone, always available. That principle, consciousness principle, because of which alone I am conscious of so many things, I focus on what I am conscious of, but I ignore the fact that I am conscious of, right? So this consciousness is always taken for granted, even though it is available every moment. Suppose we are walking on the road in midday. We see so many things, so many objects, so many shops, right? The policeman, the traffic signal, all of that. So many changes are happening. But we miss one principle which is there all over, right? What is it? Everybody ignores the sunlight. Even though we experience the sunlight, and in fact, because of the sunlight only, we are able to experience all other objects and happenings. But the all ever, right, revealing sunlight, we take for granted. Rather, we ignore. There is a very nice joke that Swamiji says in this context. I believe a boy was asked, which is more useful, sun or moon, right? After long thinking, he answered, moon alone is useful. Why, can you guess? Because it shines during the night when everything is dark, but the sun is utterly useless because it is unnecessarily shining during the day when we don't require any light, right? So the day is day only because of the continuous availability of sunlight without undergoing any change. And moonlight is nothing but reflected sunlight, right? So there is basically the sunlight which is being ignored at all times, right? So there's a comparison now with consciousness principle because we need something near to compare, right? So in and through every experience, the consciousness principle is available. We never notice it until we actually come to the Vedanta studies and the Vedantic teacher introduces it as a topic of study. So some jrumbate, meaning unmissably or it cannot be missed, available, shines through all the time, right? Asau Atma, right? So, Antaspuran Ekadha, steadily shining within myself. Why within myself? Because consciousness is within myself, behind the Panchakosha. Anyontara Atma, Pranamaya, then Manomaya. We saw that in Taittiriya Upanishad, in the Panchakosha Viveka. It happens step by step. So, Anyontara Atma is behind the three bodies. So, Antaspuran, shining within brilliantly, Ekada, means Ekarupena, uniformly without any change, right? Pratyagrupataya, as the innermost self. Pratyagrupam means inner self, inner nature of everything, right? So, the bodies differ from individual to individual. The mind differs, the intellect differs, thoughts differ, character differs, quality differs, right? But the consciousness is uniform in everyone, which is our real nature. Pratyagrupataya means the innermost self, it shines. Sada aham aham iti. So the self shines all the time. And when we use the word I, right? So it does not change. This word I does not change. How do we say that? When I was a boy, right? That time also, if you look at the time when I was a boy or a girl, At that time, what do you say? I am a boy, I am a girl, right? In middle age also, I use the word I am. In old age also, I use the word I am. That word is non-variable. Therefore, the meaning of the word I must be non-variable. How can the ever-changing body, where the cells are constantly changing and the entire body is getting replenished with a new set of cells, right? How can the ever-changing body be the meaning of the non-changing I? So, the non-variable I requires a non-variable factor as its meaning, and that is consciousness. So, every living being uses the word I, and every human being basically has got consciousness. That I, the consciousness, is the same in everyone. So, sada aham iti ekada pratyagrupadaya antaspuran asau samvrunchate, right? So, samujrumbate. So, consciousness shines in which state? If you look at it, it shines in which state? It shines in Jagrata Avastha, it shines in Swapna Avastha, and even in deep sleep state, it is there. That is why you are able to wake up and say, I was fast asleep, right? So in Sushupti, which is an unmanifest condition, the registration of consciousness is always there, right? That's why when I wake up, the registered experience also wakes up and we say, I slept. So there is an experience of Sushupti Avastha, the deep sleep state, only because the consciousness is there and it is registered in the Karana Shariram, right? So, Jagrat Swapna Sushuptishu Sfutatara, clearly, doubtlessly, right? It is there. If you ask, are you conscious or not, right? To even say I am conscious, right? You have to be conscious, right? So, Sputataram is thus very clearly available, clearly shines out. Sputataram samujrumbate. So basically, this whole shloka is one grammatical sentence. But in case there are grammar students here, Sanskrit grammar students, very interesting to note that Swamiji uses this method to cut long sentences into short ones. This Pashian here, for instance, yeah, the Pashian here, that is a Shatru, right? Usage, Kridanta. So you just take it as Pashyati, right? And convert that participle into a verb. Then you can like kind of cut it into different sentences and read. So you can stop it with Pashyati, then Nitya Ananda Chidatmana Spurati, etc. Right? Anyway, it's not for everybody. So I'm going back to the meaning. So Atma Pashyati. So Atma sees or Atma reveals, Atma illumines, Atma witnesses without undergoing a change. What does it witness? Aham dhi mukhan iman. Right? Aham dhihi. Ahankara thought. Aham vritti. The I thought. Which is constantly saying, I went, I saw, I did this. Right? Mukhan means mamakara. And the word world thought also. Right? So endless world thoughts which are nana akara vikaraha. They are of different or manifold shapes because every thought will have a different configuration in keeping with the object perceived. So Ghatavritti will have Ghatakara Vikaraha, Patavritti will have Patakara Vikaraha, therefore Nanakara Vikaraha. So Vikaraha means changes because one thought does not remain continuously. Even as I'm talking, every word must generate a relevant thought in the mind, right? And the words are then joined together to form sentences, right? And the sentences come together for us to understand a topic. So, nanakara vikara bhaginaha. Bhaginaha means endowed with variety and changes, right? So, there are so many thoughts, and all these thoughts the Atma witnesses, right? So, the essence of the third line, which is Iman Ahamdi Mukan Nanakara Vikara Bhaginaha Pashyati, my real nature, right? Basically, is this, and consciousness reveals all the changes all the time, that itself remaining changeless. So it transcends time and space, and consciousness is thus transcendental, which is absolute reality or paramarthika satyam. Whereas all anatma, including body, mind, sense, complex, all of them exist within time and space. And whatever is within time and space is called empirical reality or vyavaharika satyam. I am very happy with the Sanskrit terms rather than using empirical reality, etc. So you can just use paramarthika satyam and vyavaharika satyam, right? So the absolute reality is paramarthika satyam and vyavaharika satyam is what we experience in the Jagrata Avastha. So body is empirical reality, consciousness is absolute reality. Then the fourth line, that is, Nitya Ananda Chidatmana Spurati, right? So it is eternal, of the nature of happiness, and that is why everybody is interested in Atma, because Atma gives you that. Atma is of the nature of happiness, right? So Anandamaya Kosha we saw during Panchakosha Viveka. So therefore Nitya Ananda Rupena Spurati, in the form of original happiness. Basically it's in the form of original happiness, Atma, from which alone I take a copy, right? In the form of Pratibimba Ananda, which is reflected in the Anandamaya Kosha. So the original Atma gets reflected and the reflection is formed, right? So original happiness is not with me at all. Original happiness is me, the Atma, right? So Nityananda Chit Atmana. Chit means consciousness. Atmana means in the form of pure consciousness and pure happiness, I, the Atma, am available. Tam etam hridi swam vidhi. Right? In your heart, hridi. Saptami vibhakti. In your heart, vidhi. May you know. So the Atma is within Vijnanamaya Kosha, Anandamaya Kosha, within Anandamaya Kosha in the form of witness of the blankness itself. In Vijnanamaya Kosha as the witness of the thoughts. So as a witness, it is available in Hridayam, Hrid meaning the heart, right? And the heart here indicates the mind. And as per Vedanta, the mind resides in the heart, right? So Shankaracharya did this major analysis in Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, Brahma, right? Analysis in the Bhashyam. We saw the summary of it in the Taittiriya Upanishad, Anandavalli section, right? So detailed inquiry was done. So as I said, according to the scriptures, the original place of the mind is not the brain, it is the heart, right? Therefore, may you know that you cannot know this Atma by objectification. Know it only by claiming I am the Atma. Vidhi tam etam. Swam, which is your own nature. It is the self. So this is extension number 1. So with this, we have covered the I part of the Jiva part. So Atma is covered with that, right? So 61 to 65, it points out the essential nature of every individual, which is the consciousness principle. Now we move on to extension number 2, which is the Brahman aspect, which we have to discuss. Brahma bhinnatva vijnanam.
Brahma bhinnatva vijnanam.
Bhavamokshasya karanam.
Bhavamokshasya karanam.
Enadvitiyamanandam.
Enadvitiyamanandam.
Brahma sampadhyate budhaihi.
Brahma sampadyate budhaihi.
So now the second stage is where Acharya is borrowing heavily from the Upanishad, right? So one thing we have to remember is Acharya has not given his own teaching, right? It is not any speculation. All the traditional Acharyas have extracted the message from one original source called Veda or Vedanta. Acharya Shankaracharya himself writes in his commentary that this teaching has been given by several Acharyas who existed before me, right? So people say Shankaracharya's Advaita. No. Acharya himself says no, right? he says in Taittiriya Upanishad Bhashyam, the very second shloka starts with this. Yairime guribhif purvam padavakya pramanatah vakyata sarva vedantas tannityam pranatosmyaham. So he says very clearly, right? Purvam, there are a lot of people who have actually Yairime gurubihi, by lot of gurus. So Shankaracharya says he's only compiled and he has added his own supportive reasons and presented it in the form of the threefold bhashyams. The commentary on the Upanishad, Bhagavad Gita and Brahma Sutra. Thus, through Prasthanatraya Bhashyam, Shankaracharya has presented the teachings of the Upanishad, and that alone he is presenting here, right? Okay, so here Upanishad talks about the essential nature of the universe. Until now, we talked about the essential nature of the individual living being or the micro. Now it is the universal self or the cosmos, which includes all living beings, galaxies, cosmos. The scientists even now struggle to understand, right? Big Bang and so many theories keep coming out, but they've still not been able to get the crux of it, right? So Vedanta has given the essence of cosmos long before, and Vedanta dares anyone to challenge that. Even now, nobody has been able to challenge that. The challenge is still open. So the essential nature of the cosmos, the macro, is Brahman, right? So Brahman means consciousness. So earlier, what did Acharya say? He said Atma is the essence of every individual. Here we are saying Brahman is the universal self, and that is the essence of the entire cosmos. Then in the third level, we will say that the universal self, the essence of macro, and the individual self, the essence of micro, both are one indivisible principle. So that will be the third level. So first level, individual is talked about. Second level, the universal self is talked about. So then the Brahma Aikyam, Atma Brahma Aikyam will come. So the Mahavakyams will come here, and the teacher says, Tatu Tvam Asi. Tatu meaning the universal self behind the entire universe, and Tvam, you, the individual self behind your body-mind complex. Asi, both are one and the same. And if the student has traveled with the teacher along so long, if he has traveled, the student will respond, making the teacher very happy, saying, Aham Brahma Asmi. So this is going to be the development, right? Tvam Padartha is over. Tat Padartha we are entering. Later Asi Padartha will come, right? So we are actually entering the Tat Padartha. So Brahma Abhinnatva Vijnanam Bhavamokshasya Karanam. Brahma Abhinnatva, the knowledge of the oneness, Abhinnatvam means oneness of Brahma, the universal self, that is the truth of the universe, right, is the same as the truth of the individual self, the Atma. So the Atma Brahma Abhinnatva Vijnanam, the knowledge of the non-difference between I, the individual self, and Brahman, the universal self, is the ultimate knowledge we are aiming at. So all the previous portions, the answer to all the 7 questions are only launching pads. So this threefold extension alone is the teaching, and in Sanskrit it's called Tatparyam, right? The central teaching. I am the truth of the universe. So if the universe appears real with courage, the Vedantin says, the reality of the universe does not belong to the universe. The Jnani says, I lend reality to the cosmos and make it appear real. Without me, the world cannot exist. This is just as the way. Basically, exactly like the waker who claims, I lend reality to the dream world by entering the dream. But what does the layman say? Without the world's support, I cannot exist. I am dependent on the world. This is samsara. So the world is dependent on me is moksha. Me must be correctly understood. That is a jnani. And diagonally opposite, right, is I am dependent on the world for everything. Right? So Brahma Abhinnatva Vijnanam. The Atma Brahma Abhinnatva Vijnanam, this knowledge of the non-difference between I, the individual self, and Brahman, the universal self, that knowledge alone, Bhava Mokshasya Karanam. will lead to freedom from samsara. Bhavaha means samsara rogaha. Right? So, very interestingly, there are two types of becoming, right? Now, you become a graduate by studying more, you become a postgraduate, you become a doctorate, you climb the corporate ladder, you become a director, a vice president, a CEO, etc. Sometimes you're successful, sometimes not. The second type of becoming is I'm becoming old, which I didn't deliberately become, but it happened in spite of my struggle to stay young. So, life is a continuous struggle of deliberately or naturally becoming something else. It can happen both ways. It is a helpless situation that is called samsara. So, bhava mokshaha means transcending this becoming thing, right? Basically, becoming implies I'm within time and space, empirical existence. So, through the Brahma Abhinnatva Vijnanam, I transcend that empirical existence. I become absolute existence and show everybody and myself that nobody can touch me now, not even Yamadharma Raja, right? So, Bhavamokshasya means freedom from becoming, freedom from Punarapi Jananam, Punarapi Maranam cycle, right? So, now if we ask, can Bhakti give liberation? If Bhakti leads us to get this knowledge, it will give liberation. But if Bhakti is anything else, it will not give liberation, right? So the Veda is very clear on this aspect. Nanyaf panta vidyate ayanaya, right? We don't have multi paths, many paths for liberation. This is the only way. If you don't believe in it, Veda says, try all other ways. Finally come to me. Therefore, this Brahma Abhinnatva Vijnanam Bhavamokshasya Karanam, right? So, Ena Advitiyam Anandam Brahma Budaihi Sampadyate. So, Ena, by this knowledge, right, the wise people attain oneness with Brahman. So, this knowledge is not yet explained, it is only an introduction, right? So, through this knowledge which is going to be given, one can attain oneness with Brahman. Brahman sampadyate budhaihi. So Brahman is attained by a jnani. And what type of Brahman? Advitiyam, which is non-dual, secondless, which is one absolute reality without a second. And not only that, Anandam, the embodiment of Ananda, right? We don't say jnani is happy. Jnani is happiness himself, right? So Jnani claims that Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha anandam brahmano vidwan na bibeti kadachaneti. So the jnani becomes one with Brahma, Ananda, and he's not scared or worried about anybody, right? So the knowledge gives him fulfillment. Therefore, even the experiential happiness, right? He gets this much more through this, right? So, ena advitiyam anandam brahma budaihi sampadyate, right? So, that is the meaning of this shloka. Brahma bhinnatva vijnanam bhavamokshasya karanam enadvitiyam anandam brahma sampadyate buddhaihi, right? This verse 67 is not in a regular meter, so we just read it as a prose. Satyam jnanam anantam brahma
Satyam jnanamanantam Brahma
vishuddham param swatah siddham
Vishuddham Param Swatasiddham
nityanandaikarasam
Nityanandaikarasam
pratyagavinnam nirantaram jayati.
Pratyagabhinnan Nirantaram Jayati.
So Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, Brahma. So Brahma means truth of the entire universe, right? And according to Vedanta, nobody can speak about the ultimate truth because it is apaurushaya vishya, beyond the human realm. So nobody can find out except through going through Vedanta and a Vedantic guru and going through a consistent and systematic study of Vedanta. So Shankaracharya quotes here that the very definition of, basically he's taking the definition of Brahman as available in Taittiriya Upanishad, second chapter, Brahmavalli, Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. So Taittiriya students may remember. Satyam means the absolute reality. which is different from the empirical reality, that is the world, and also different from the subjective reality, which is the dream. So we have three types of reality: subjective reality, which is the dream; empirical reality, which is the waking state; and absolute reality, the consciousness. So we use the terms pratibhasika satyam for subjective reality, right? And then vyavaharika satyam for the reality that we see in the waking state, and then absolute reality, paramarthika satyam. So the dream world, if you see, borrows reality from empirical reality. Empirical reality borrows reality from absolute reality. So absolute reality is the only one which is intrinsically real. Therefore, only it is called Satyam, the absolute truth. So this is basically the Tat Padartha or Brahma Padartha. So the teacher is introducing basically the Tat Padartha for the first time here, right? So, and Shankaracharya is extracting messages from about Brahman from Chandogya Upanishad, Taittiriya Upanishad, etc. And Shankaracharya gives the nature of Brahman. Nature of Brahman meaning what we refer to as Swarupa Lakshanam, that is Brahman's nature, and Tatastha Lakshanam is Brahman's nature as understood from the standpoint of the world. We'll see samples of both here. First, Swarupa Lakshanam, nature of Brahman as it is given in the famous, it's taken from the famous Taittiriya mantras, Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. So, Satyam meaning absolute reality, by which we mean that which has got an independent existence of its own. Because from the Vedantic point of view, other than Brahman, other than Atma, everything else is dependently existing, right? Either in the form of empirical existence, that is the world, or in the form of subjective existence, which is the dream. But both of them are borrowed existence only. Therefore, Brahman is called absolute reality, which has unborrowed or own existence, and therefore only it will exist always. So borrowed existence is losable, whereas unborrowed existence will always be there. Just exactly like how the fire will be intrinsically hot, right? So jnanam means the nature of consciousness, the five-featured consciousness, which we have seen before. So now Brahman's nature is presented as the very same consciousness. And we remember along with Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, right? Anantam is a very, very important adjective. Anantam indicates limitless, indicating that the consciousness is not a temporary product which is existent in the brain, but consciousness is manifest in the brain and it exists outside the brain also, because the Upanishad uses the term Anantam. This all-pervasive consciousness is known from Shastra Pramanam only. So if a person says, I do not accept Shastra Pramanam, please prove logically how the consciousness is all-pervading, etc. We will not be able to. So the limitlessness of consciousness is known from Shastra Pramanam. And Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma occurs in Taittiriya Upanishad. Therefore, Anantam, very important. Limitless. Vedanta talks about threefold limitations: spatial limitation, time-wise limitation, and object-wise limitation. So it is found only here, right? Not anywhere else. So it is basically time-wise limitation is, it is found here, it is not found in some other period of time elsewhere, right? So, and Brahman is not one of the objects in the creation, which is, just another object. It is distinct from all other objects. Thus, Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, Brahma, then Vishuddham, Param, Swatasiddham. Vishuddham, it is pure, free from all types of physical, emotional, intellectual impurities in the form of even ignorance. Param, it is transcendental. Param means transcendental or absolute, and transcendental means not within the realm of time and space. Therefore, not related to any object within time and space, non-relational, but transcendental, swataha siddham, self-existent and self-revealing as the consciousness principle. Right? Nitya Ananda Ekarasam Pratyak Abhinnam Nirantaram Jayati. It is of the nature of eternal Ananda, right? And when we were discussing Anandamaya Kosha, we talked about reflected or experienced Ananda. At that time, we said reflected Ananda is possible because Atma happens to be the original Ananda, right? Exactly like the original face and the reflected face. So there we talked about original Ananda indirectly. Here we say Brahman is original Ananda, non-experiential Ananda, non-graded Ananda, Nitya or eternal Ananda. And what type of Ananda? It is Ekarasam. The word Ekarasam is used for happiness or Ananda and used for consciousness also, right? A very significant word in Vedanta. It conveys a very unique concept and needs a lot of mananam. So in Tarka Shastra, they talk about everything in the creation as a mixture of two things. In fact, there's a course in Vyoma also about it, and I also have a simple transcription of 10 classes of Swamiji. It's put up in arshavinash.in site. If you want, you can look at those notes. In Tarka Shastra, they talk about everything in the creation as a mixture of two things. One is substance and the other is its attribute. So everything in the creation has to be in the form of a pair consisting of substance and attribute. So the purest substance will be free from every other thing, but even the purest substance will have its own attribute, which defines and specifies that substance. Right? The whole world is made up of substance and attribute duality, which are inseparable. Samavaya Sambandha, it is referred to in Nyaya Shastra, okay, the Tarka Shastra. So it's generally accepted in several philosophical systems. Only Advaita Vedanta, right? Not even Vishishta Advaitam says this duality or internal division or Swagata Beda is applicable only within the field of Anatma. Whereas when you come to Atma, there will be no substance attribute duality, right? So Atma is not the locus of some attribute. We are saying asangatvam, right? Akarta, abhokta, etc. We have to discern that. There is no locus for any of these attributes, right? They are not attributes, basically. So what about consciousness? Can you call consciousness as a substance or attribute? Right? In Tarka Shastra, don't get confused. They treat Atma as substance and consciousness as attribute. Vedanta denies both. Consciousness is not an attribute. It is not a substance also. Atma is consciousness. It is neither a substance nor an attribute. It does not come under any category. Ananda is also like that, right? So Shastra needs to convey that to us. So it is using the word Eka Rasam, right? Ekarasam meaning it doesn't fall under substance attribute dichotomy or duality, right? So it is attribute Vyatirikta Nityananda Karasam, right? Therefore, Pratyag Abhinnam, this alone is the proposition here, which is going to be elaborated in the third stage of teaching. Here, the word Pratyag Abhinnam means not different from the individual self. So, Brahman, the ultimate absolute reality, is not different from the individual self, the Atma. Therefore, the revised I is the absolute truth. That's the indication given here, which is going to be further discussed in the third stage. So, Pratyag meaning individual self, Abhinnam meaning non-different or identical with Brahman. So, it is a Mahavakyam basically. Pratyag Abhinnam is a compound word. It can be Pratija Abhinnam, right? Pratyagatmana Abhinnam. So, Nirantaram Jayati always stands out as the ultimate reality, which will be there even after dismissing everything else. Undismissably, it will be present, right? Jayati literally means to stand victorious, right? It will remain supreme all the time, right? The idea is it is transcendental and this is the Swarupa Lakshanam of Brahman. Basically, the nature of Brahman. Now we are going to get the Tatastha Lakshanam of Brahman, in which Brahman is revealed in relation to the world. So that with the help of the world, by contrasting with it, we can try to capture or grasp what is Brahman. So once the relationship is known, through that we can arrive at Brahman. Otherwise, the Swarupa Lakshanam is too abstract to conceive of. Thus, Tatastha Lakshanam is given for the facility of our understanding. And what is the relationship between Brahman and the world? right? The Jagrat Prapancha that we are experiencing. That is what we are going to get in the next verse. So, Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma Vishuddham Param Swatasvidnam Nityanandaika Rasam Pratyaga Binnam Nirantaram Jayati. Right? That is the Swarupa Lakshanam. Now we are going to get the Tatastha Lakshanam in verse 68. Sadbrahma Karyam Sakalam Sadaiva
Brahma Karyam Sakalam Sadaiva
Sanmatrame Tanna Tatonyadasti
Tanmatrame Tanna Tatonyadasti
Astiti yo vaktina tasya mohaha
Astiti yo Bhaktina Tasya Mohaha
Vinirgato nidritavat prajalpaha.
Vinirgato Nitritavat Prajalpaha.
So, what is the relationship between Brahman and the world? So, Upanishad says Brahman is the cause or Karanam. Cause of what? Sad Brahma Karyam Sakalam. Sakalam meaning the entire Jagrat Prapancha, the universe that we experience in the waking state, which includes all the galaxies, all the Panchabhutas, etc. It is all born out of Brahman only. Therefore, the world is Karyam. So, Brahman is Karanam. And how did Brahman become the cause of the creation? How did Brahman create the world? Then we have to recollect some of the teachings, right? The old teachings that we have gone through till now, because Vivekachudamani is very, very packed and heavy, right? So we discussed the Karna Shariram in verses 31 to 33. Therefore, Karna Shariram, we used 4 words: Avyaktam, Avidya, Maya, Paramesha Shaktihi. So Paramesha refers to the consciousness principle. So in Vedanta, in the context of creation, consciousness or Brahman is called God. So once the topic of creation comes, Brahman is renamed Paramesha. So the Supreme God. And when I say Supreme God, we should not imagine, Rama, Krishna, Devati with beautiful body, eye, etc. No, they are all the initial stages of God definition. So in Gita, we saw Eka Rupa Ishvara to Aneka Rupa Ishvara, Vishwarupa Ishvara to Arupa Ishvara. So in Vedantic context, God means Brahman, the consciousness principle. So Brahman has Maya as its power, Maya Shaktihi. So the power of Brahman has got 2 divisions, Vikshepa Shaktihi and Avarana Shaktihi. If you remember, we went through all this, right? So just as we have this Nidra Shakti where we are able to project a dream world with lots of names, forms, functions, etc. And similarly in the Maya, all the names, forms and functions are in dormant condition. And Brahman is there supporting that Nama Rupa Karma. Therefore, Brahman and Maya Shakti, its creative power, otherwise called Vikshepa Shakti, was there. And from Brahman, at the time of creation, governed by the law of karma, which is operational in Maya, the universe evolved, right? So Brahman doesn't do anything. In the presence, the Maya gets elaborated, thrown, expanded, right? Just as the many vasanas in our mind, right, which throw out the dream universe in dream the moment we go to sleep, right? Avyakrita Nama Rupani. The universe gets projected. So in Brihadaranyaka also, there is a very famous quotation, Tadedam Vyakrita Masi Tannama Rupabhyameva Vyakriyata Sauna Mayamidam Rupam. 147 Brihadaranyaka Upanishad says, basically from the creative power of Brahman, the whole universe gets projected. The world is thus a projection like our dream. And if you ask, is the dream real or unreal, right? Very important. You should not answer. For a dreamer, in dream, the dream world appears real and existent. And the dream world appears real as long as we are in the spell of Nidra. The moment we wake up, the so-called real dream, the so-called existent dream, loses both its existence and its reality. So that existence and reality, right, are both synonymous. Thus, the waker alone projects the dream world. The waker gives existence to the dream world. The Veka gives reality to the dream world temporarily with his Nidra Shakti. But the moment he wakes up, when the Nidra Shakti spell is gone, he understands that the dream appeared real only with borrowed reality, but it doesn't have any intrinsic reality. It is therefore called Mithya. Right? Not only it appears real, the dream world has got its own experienceability, transactability, and utility. Swamiji uses the term ETU. All these three we do not deny. Vedanta extends this dream analogy to creation also. Brahman is like the super waker. So the ordinary waker projects the dream world. The super waker Brahman projects the super dream world called Jagrat Prapancha. So what we have is regular dream, and what comes there is what is called Yoga Nidra, basically, right? So, and that is how the Jagrat Prapancha is projected. So Vedanta says these are all real, but without its own reality. They're all real only with borrowed reality. Like the moon is bright with borrowed brightness, so too the world is bright because Brahman has donated reality and existence to the world. So Brahman is the super waker with Maya Shakti. Therefore, Acharya says here, Sat Brahma Karyam Sakalam. Sakalam meaning the entire universe consisting of infinite names, forms, functions, etc. Right? So they are all basically configurations, and you can keep on dismantling, right? So Acharya uses the word Sat to indicate that Brahman has got its own existence. Sadrupam Brahma, and not only to convey this message, Shankaracharya also wants to connect it to few Upanishads, and Vivekachudamani is obviously drawing a lot heavily from the Upanishad, and the Sat part actually comes from the Chandogya Upanishad, and we will see more about this in the next class. Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Please note, next week I'm not there, but hopefully after that there will be no break. I'm praying. So 16th June there will be no class. We will meet on 23rd June Sunday, same time. And I think before the end of July, we should be able to get to the end of the Vivekachudamani sessions.